We are on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, a few lines. We were at four lines from the top of the page. We have just now learned concerning the kaira, the beam, which we will put on top of the mavoi. So the Mishnah says it has to be Esrim Amma, the maximum height is Esrim Amma. So we just now had explained that the intention of the Mishnah is that the space between the beam and the floor, that is the maximum height of 20 ammas, and that does not include the thickness or anything of the beam. So therefore, when we speak about the maximum height, we don't need any part of the beam to be within 20 ammas from the floor. The 20 ammas is the maximum space between the floor and the beam. So that's what we that's what we got to till now, and that was the conclusion. The Gemara is going to ask a question now. He asks him the question. There's a brisa. What does the brisa say about the kaira, about the beam, which you put at the end of the mavui? How did you make the beam? Maniach kaira, you put the beam misfas esrim ulamata, from the edge of 20 cubits and lower. So therefore, it certainly seems that the beam has to be, the entire beam has to be lower than the 20 cubits. Not like we said that the Esrim Amma is the amount of space that there is between the floor and the beam. On the contrary, it seems that the entire beam has to be within the 20 cubits from the floor. Because there was misfas esrim ulamata. So the Gemara says, no, say ema ulamaila, that that the beam should be from the edge of 20 and upwards. In other words, the beam should be on top of the bottom part, should be touching the edge, and then the rest of the beam is above the 20. The entire beam, in fact, is above the 20 because the bottom of it is just touching the edge of 20. So the Gemara says, in a second, how can you say that? It says in the Brisa lamata, and you can't just exchange the word of lamata for lamaila. I mean, it's a bit much to me. Sometimes we can make a bit of a fix, a little bit, a tikkun, missing a word or something, some mistake. But to say that whoever was learning this Brisa, he got it completely the opposite way around, or that's is very strange. So therefore, the Gemara is not prepared to accept that we should exchange the word of lamata for lamaila. That's the question. Well, lamata katon. So the Gemara says this. Okay, let's keep the word ulamata, and actually the way I've seen some versions, some version that to be gerus in the Gemara v'chein lamata. So what we've done is we say maniach kaira misfas esrim v'chein lamata instead of ulamata. So we're making a small change, and we're saying v'chein lamata, and probably that's the intention of Rashi as well. So then there's two things being said over here. First of all, maniach kaira misfas esrim. So then, which you can very well explain that it means misfas esrim and upwards. And then v'chein lamata, also if you have a very low kaira, so because there is a minimum height to the kaira, and Hokamashman is teaching us the lamata kilomaila, that the the minimum share of the kaira is like the maximum share. Mala Mila, by saying the words v'chein lamata. That's what he's teaching us. Mala Mila chalola esrim, just like the shear, which is esrim. When it comes to Mila for the maximum height, it means without with the beam. Yeah, the maximum height is 20. 1 second, I'm just trying to get people in. No reason. Okay. Yeah. So just like the maximum height is without the beam, when we speak about the 20 cubits, the same thing. Um, uh, so when we speak about the minimum amount, and we say that the minimum height of the koira is 10 tfachim, it also means that the space is 10 tfachim, and the koira cannot be counted as part of the 10 tfachim. So we have answered the question from the Brisa, but saying that the Brisa here is speaking about two dinim, one of the maximum height and one of the minimum height, and that remains the pshat that the shear for a mavoi is that the space is esrim amo, and the beam should be touching that maximum space. Okay, now we have to figure out what is the amount of what is the size of the ammo, how big the ammo is, because there are actually a few types of ammo. The ammo is made out of usually about 6 tfachim. 6 tfachim, that's the width of the hand, but it's not physically it's not exact. The ammo is exactly 6 tfachim. It's not exact. The kitzur, so therefore the ammo, there were a few types of ammo. There were those ammos which had the 5 tfachim. There were those ammos which had 6 tfachim, and there were some other differentiations between the types of ammo, as we will see as we go along. So the Rabbi said the name of Nachman, Amma Sukkah, the Amma of a Sukkah, with the Amma in other words, which is mentioned in Hilchah Sukkah, relevant to the laws of Sukkah, the Amma Smavoi, and the Amma which is relevant. When we speak about the measurement of Amma, which is relevant to the laws of the Mavoi, the Amma Bas Chamisha. So that it's when we talk about an Amma which is made up of 5 tfach. So it's a small Amma, which is only the size of 5 tfach. Ammas Kloim, whereas when it comes to the Amma in the Hilchus of Kloim, that you're not allowed to grow wheat together with vines, and we talk about distances over there, which they have to separate between the wheat and the vines. That is the Amma Basheshet. That is talking about the Amma, which is made up of 6 tfachim, a larger Amma. So one thing needs to be understood. On all these mishnahs, it always just says Amma. So all these halachas, we say Amma. We don't say this type of Amma, that type of Amma. So what is Rabbi Nachman telling us? Rabbi Nachman is telling us that that even though it says Amma, it means 5. It means 6 tfachim. How come the Amma here is no mention given of the here that is 5 tfachim, there 6 tfachim? It doesn't say the number of what type of Amma it is. Because the answer is because the halacha is it's an Amma, and since we don't know what Amma it is, so therefore we always go to Chumrah. So the reason why by Sukkah and by Mavi it's 5, because the Chumrah is to take a smaller Amma. The reason by Koloim we say 6, because the Chumrah it's a larger Amma. In other words, all these halachas say an Amma, and we do not know what the intention is, whether it's intention of a Amma, which is the larger Amma of 6 tefachim, or the smaller Amma of 5 tefachim. So therefore, we always will go with caution, and we go to the Chumrah, and that's what we'll do. And that's the reason for this. So now the Gemara is going to analyze. The Gemara is going to analyze. Let's see. Amos Mavoi, but Amos Nachamisha. Gemara says this. So when we say Amos Mavoi, we're talking about a small Amma. of 5 tefach. The Ma'il what to which halachas is it relevant? Where we mention the size of an amor concerning a mavoi, legoivoi to the height of the mavoi, esrim amor. That's how high the beam should be. Also, so how high can the beam be, and it will still be kosher and still be permitted to carry. So therefore, we can understand that since we're not sure what type of amor, we should use the smaller amor, that the maximum height. To get the maximum height, we cannot use the larger, say a larger size, a larger height is permitted. No, if you want it permitted, you're not sure whether when we say amor, it means 5 tefachim or 6 tefachim. So therefore, we have to go for, in order to be machmir, to say that the korah has to be made up of an amor which is smaller of 5 tefachim. Okay, so we understand we're going l'chum. Similarly, also with pirtzas mavoi, there is another thing. If there's a break in the mechitzas of the mavoi, if the break is less than 10 amos, you can carry. If it's more than 10 amos, then you can't carry. So if the break is more than 10 amos, so you can't carry. So again, which way is the chumrah? To say that the 10 amos are a smaller amount, that the 10 amos are made out of amos which are 5 tefachim. So therefore, we understand very well that when it comes to those dinim of the mavoi, the chumrah is to always make a smaller thing, and therefore you be careful not to be over the stuff. But the Gemara asks a question: there is the size of the mavoi. There is a minimum size of a mavoi. In other words, and that is 4 cubits. So since there is the minimum size, if the mavoi is less than 4 amos in depth, less than 4 cubits in depth of the mavoi, then it's not considered a mavoi. It will have a din of a chotzer, whatever. It's different dinim, and it's more strict. The mavoi is a bit more lenient, the dinim of the mavoi. So therefore, so the maximum size the minimum size of a mavoi is 4 amos. Now, if you will say that it's kosher even with small amos, so then you're going l'kula. So therefore, the amos over there, you will have to make larger amos. So therefore, the question is, how come that we said by mavoi it's always the smaller amos? We see here by mavoi that we have to say it's bigger amos, because if you say it's smaller amos, it'll work out the kula. You'll say this is kosher to be a mavoi, even though it has only small 4 amos. So the Gemara answers, Commander Omar Baba Tfachim, because Rav Nachman, he is of the opinion that it's not true that the size of the mavoi is 4 amos. The size of the mavoi is 4 tefachim. That's according to Rav Nachman. That's a machlokes which we will learn later. There's a machlokes. What is the minimum size of the mavoi? Machlokes between Rabbi Yosef and Abaya, and according to Rabbi Yosef, it's 4 tefachim. So 4 tefachim, actually, the mavoi has to be a drop longer than the width. Now the width has to be 4 tefachim. The width has to be 4 tefachim of the mavoi, the entrance, because any entrance which is less than 4 tefachim, we'll come up with this halacha later as well. Any entrance which is less than 4 tefachim is not considered an entrance. So therefore, the entrance to the mavoi is going to have to be a minimum of 4 tefachim. The length of the mavoi, the depth, is therefore will have to be a drop more, because the din of the mavoi, the length has to be more than the breadth. The kids, but nevertheless, it's more or less it's 4 tefachim. So according to Rabbi Yosef, the depth of the mavoi is 4 tefachim. So therefore, Rav Nachman, when he gave his statement that the mavoi we go according to 5 tefachim, he didn't have a problem of when it's 4 amos of the depth of the mavoi, because he doesn't agree with 4 amos. So he's just talking about the other ones. And those other ones, it's always the chumrah to make it the smaller tefach. So that's just one answer. The Iboy Sem another answer is 4 amos for 4 amos. He's talking about the Taki. He agrees with Nachman also holds of 4 amos, that the minimum size of a mavoi is 4 amos, and that Taka you need to have large amos. He's talking about the minimum size to make it kosher. So you need to have taka big amos. And when he said that the amos of the mavoi are small amos, he meant the majority of the amos. Okay, Now we're going to analyze. We're going to go through the. Gemara is going to analyze the same type of analysis both by sukkah and both by kalayim, and go through all these scenarios. So Amos sukkah. Let's see. So again, Amos sukkah. What do we say? What Nachman said. This is Abaya saying the name of Rav Nachman. That's his version. Rav Nachman. We're not discussing Abaya's version of Rav Nachman. So Amos sukkah, but Amos bas chamisha. So the sukkah is we say it's small amas, the ones which 5 tons. The my hilchasa, what's the relevance? The goiva, the height. You can't make it so high. You can't make it so tall with the 20 amas of 6 tvachim. You have to make the maximum height is only going to be at 20 amas of 5 tons. Also, the doifen akuma. What's doifen akuma? Doifen akuma is that if, for instance, a person, the roof, maybe is in Ukraine. The roof came out of the house. So the roof came out of the house. The kids, so he doesn't have a roof there. Okay, so he wants to put schach and use it for the sukkah. He wants to use it for the sukkah. But the problem is that there's still some of the roof is still around. So that now the schach of the sukkah has to be next to the walls. If it's not next to the wall, it has to be next to the walls. So therefore, since the schach of the sukkah has to be next to the wall, so therefore, when he's going to cover the schach, because it's a break in the roof, the schach is going to be a bit of a distance. Let's say it's a flat roof, yeah. So the schach is going to be a bit of a distance from the walls. So what's the halacha? The halacha is that if the distance from the walls is less than 4 amas, 4 amas, less than 6 foot, 4 amas, so then it's okay. Why? Because even though the schach is not next to the wall, but we say that the roof, it's really the wall. The wall is just going a bit crooked. So we're allowed to consider the part of the roof which remained intact next to the walls. So the part of the roof which remained intact, which is next to the walls, will be considered part of the walls, as long as that's less than 4 amas. The flat, the part of the roof which is remained intact is on each side is less than 4 amas. As long as it's less than amas, it still can be considered part of the wall, and the schach which will be next to it will be considered the schach is next to the wall, not to be kosher. So again here, so it's correct. We shouldn't allow 4 amas, big amas. Then you're being lenient. It should be machmir. Say the maximum size is 4 small amas. Okay, that's fine. So those 2 halachas, we understand why we go for sukkah, we go for the small amas. But sukkah there is the length of the sukkah, the length of the sukkah, which is the minimum size. The minimum size according to Rabbi, there's a minimum size is 4 amas. And there, if you're going to say small ones, so then you're being makel. If you say that you use small amas, it's a kula because you're having a smaller sukkah. Maybe you need to have a bigger sukkah to get the minimum size for it to be kosher. So how can you say that the sukkah it's always a smaller amas? The Tanya learned the Brisa, Rabbi Omer Ani kol sukkah she'ein bo daled amas psula. So yeah, according to Rabbi's opinion, the minimum size of sukkah is 4 amas. So the answer of the Gemara is that, well, Rav Nachman doesn't hold the opinion of Rabbi. He holds the minimum size of sukkah is not measured in amas. And since it's not measured in amas, therefore his statement that the amas of the sukkah, small one, are okay because it doesn't want you to interpret the opinion of Rabbi. He holds like the Rabbanan. But the answers Karabanan, the Amr, they say, if it's only if the sukkah is small enough, is small, right? It's large enough to be able to take the head and the majority of his body and the table, some small table. So then that's good enough. That size is good enough, which is much less than 4 amas, and therefore he doesn't hold this whole share of 4 amas. Therefore, it's not relevant to Rav Nachman. The amas of the size of the amas of the length of the sukkah are not relevant to Rav Nachman. That's one teretz. The Iboy Sema, Rabbi, you know what? You can say that even Rav Nachman can even agree with Rabbi. But nevertheless, when he said that the amas of the sukkah are small ones, he meant the majority. Most of the amas by sukkah are small. But Rav amas okay. Amas kalayim, What's the story? What's the story? The Amos Kalayim, the Amos Bashisha. There we said no. The Kalayim will go with bigger Amos. The Mayil said, what's the the Karachas Hakerem the Mechoil Hakerem. Karachas Hakerem means that in the vineyard, there's the Karachas means a bald patch, means part of the vineyard, in the middle of the vineyard has been destroyed. The middle of the vineyard has been destroyed, and there's no vine trees in the middle of the vineyard. So you have the vineyard, which is full of vine trees, all in order. Then, for whatever reason, in the middle of it has been cleared out, and you have vine trees from all sides, or if you can have it from two sides, whichever. Either you have vine trees from four sides or from two sides. Now, how much does the distance have to be between? How large does it have to be the size of this bald patch in the karam that you should be able to plant wheat inside? That's the karachas karam. The mechoil karam. What's mechoil karam? Mechoil karam is like a mochel when you dance in a circle, when you're surrounding. So mochel means surrounding the karam. What does it mean surrounding the karam? You have a vineyard, and the edges of the vineyard, you have the vineyard, a fenced vineyard, fences all around. So it's a fenced up vineyard, and then by the edge of the vineyard, the trees have died or whatever, they've been removed. So you have space at the edge of the vineyard between the vineyard and the wall has developed a space which is like surrounding the kerem. So again, there is certain measurements which will how big that space has to be in order to permit you to plant the wheat over there. This now not the Mishnah karachas kerem. So what's karachas kerem? That's the when you have the kerem. This vineyards, the vineyard, and it's been taken out. The vineyard, some of the trees in the middle have been removed. You can use any example. Either it's surrounded on four sides with vineyard, the vines, or on two sides with the vines. I'll speak about two sides of the vines just for the ease of saying it. So that's it, surrounded with vines on two sides, and the whole strip in the middle has been cleared away. So how wide does that strip have to be? Shama and the Shama say it has to be 24 amos wide. And the Basil say how wide does that space have to be? 16 amos. Right. So in other words, if you have okay, well, I'll just continue. So the Shema says 16 amos wide. That's how it's the surrounding of the kerem. If we're talking about that we're talking about between that some trees have been cleared out between the kerem, the vineyard, and the fence. So how much distance do you have to have there in order to be able to plant some wheat? So the Bishama, it's a bit less. The shear is less. Bishama only they say 16 cubits. The Basil say you have to have 12 cubits. 12 cubits between the end of the vineyards and the fence. Then you're able to plant. That's it continues. This mission continues. And what's karachas kerem? And kerem shechorem so the vineyard. The middle has been destroyed. Okay, the trees have been removed there for whatever reason. So let's go back. So like I said before, that you have you end up now in vineyards in two sides. The vines are on two sides, and in the middle you have this whole patch which has been cleared of the vineyards. Is in so if there is no 16 amos in the middle, you can't plant even a single seed. So you can't plant a single seed if you don't have in this whole area. You can't plant even the middle. You make the middle the furthest edge away from everything. You can't plant anything over there if it's less than 16 cubits. That space. We'll soon explain the reasoning behind. But if there's 16 cubits between the two rows of vines, then you have 16 cubits. So then you're able to plant quite a substantial amount. You have to so you have to leave space which you will not be able to use. Okay. So what does it mean? What's it mean? Sorry. You have to from each you have two rows of vines, and there's 16 cubits distance from each other. So you'll have to leave clear on each side 4 amos, which you will not be able to put in any seeds inside. You'll not be able to plant it because that's called avodas hakerem. Avodas hakerem means the area which is needed for working with the vineyard, because when in the vineyard you have to You have to be, it comes a certain before you in a certain time of the year, you have to plant around the trees. They have to sort of plow around the trees, helps to the growing, whatever you plow. And also when to pick the fruits, to pick the fruits, you come there with a wagon. Now, what kind of, you usually take a wagon, you take two oxen. The kitzer, so you take a wagon with oxen and or for the plow, whichever way, whatever it is, this wagon and the plow with the oxen, whichever way it is, when you're working on the kerem, whether it's the harvesting time or the other time, so then that distance for the oxen to walk past with a load is 4 amos wide. So therefore, those 4 amos is called avodas hakerem. So in the avodas hakerem, that's a club. It's a club. When you have a kerem, when you have a vineyard, you're not allowed to plant anything within the avodas hakerem. What's avodas hakerem? It's 4 amos. By the way, let me mention that if you have only one tree, a single tree, then you can plant yes, 6 tefachim. If you have one tree, then the amount of distance you have to move before you can plant some wheat is 6 tefachim. If you have a single tree, once you have a kerem, then the distance is much bigger, and you have to have 4 amos. The amount of 4 amos is based on avodas hakerem. So therefore, if you have this 16 amos gap, so therefore you take 4 amos from these vines, and then leave a gap where you don't plow or don't plant any wheat. And then also the other side where the vines, but next to the vines, the 4 amos on the opposite vines also have to leave a space. So you end up having 8 amos in the middle, which is you're able to plant a wheat in the 8 amos in the middle, quite a significant amount. Let me just maybe briefly say the reasoning for it, the reasoning why if it's less than 16 amos, you can't plant anything. So we said before, if it's less than 16 amos, you can't plant anything. So it's like either you can plant a whole 8 amos in the middle, or you can't plant anything. What's the reasoning there? So the reason is because next to every kerem, you have to leave space 4 amos. That's avodas hakerem, because you have to have separate the growing of the growing of the wheat, the growing of the what's it called, should be in a separate field. It has to be considered a separate field, a separate entity. Of course, all earth is connected, but it has to be considered a separate entity, and that it should not be a mixture. It should not be mixed. It's a separate entity. Okay. So the first thing is every kerem, once it's a vineyard, it takes around it 4 cubits. Now the thing is, we have an additional bit of land outside the 4 cubits. So that is considered negligible, and it's part of the 4 cubits. It's bottled to the 4 cubits. In other words, if I have 6 cubits outside, if I have 6 cubits of area outside the vineyard, no. So the next two, it's not significant enough. It's not significant enough to be considered an independent entity, and therefore, if you have a few more cubits outside the 4, it's not significant to be considered as a separate entity, and therefore it's still part of the vineyard. In order to the land outside the 4 cubits should qualify to be considered a separate entity, it has to be 4 cubits. When you have 4 cubits, 4 cubits is like the minimum size of the field, and 4 cubits is the minimum size of the field. That's considered a separate entity. So once you have the 4 cubits, after the 4 cubits which you have to leave, so that's the working space of the vineyard. After that, you need another 4 cubits for it to be considered a separate entity. So therefore, if you have less than 16 amos, the vineyards are from 2 sides at least. I mean, I can give an example on 4 sides, just complicate things. But so you have a vineyard from both sides. So you have both sides. So if you have less than 16 cubits in between, so you have 4 cubits, that is for the work to do with the kerem. You take your oxen over there. So that is certainly part of the vineyard. those 4 cubits. Then in the middle you have, 7 amas, 6 amas. If you have 7 and 6 amas, so it splits. It splits. Half it belongs to one side, half it belongs to the other side. So therefore, each side you don't have a significant enough amount to be considered something independent, to be considered an independent field, because since it splits, like I said, it splits in the middle. So you have, let's say, 3 amas, 2 amas, or 3.5 amas on top of the 4 amas. So the 3.5 amas on top of the 4 amas way where the oxen are going, that's considered insignificant. It's not considered something. The reason why it's considered insignificant is, again, because even though it's 7 amas or whatever it is in the middle, but since it splits, we split it to each in each direction, to this row of a vineyard and the other row of the vineyard. So it splits now. So it's only when you have 8 amas. When you have 8 amas, that means that each side has a significant addition. That is, so therefore you have 4 on this side, 4 on this side, besides the 4. Besides the 4 where the oxen are going to go. Since you have 4 amas, 4 amas is an entity in its own. It's an entity in its own. Therefore, you can plant that. So it's either if you have 15 amas, the space between the vineyards, you can't plant anything. You have 16 amas between the vineyards, you can just, if it's 6 amas, then you have 2 entities in the middle, and you can plant both of them, each entity of 4 amas. I will not explain Beishamai, just because Beishamai, these measurements, it's similar style, but it's just their measurements are a bit bigger. So I just won't go into it. That's why they end up at 24. And then we have the Ezer Mochel Kerem. What's a Mochel Kerem? Mochel Kerem, that we said, that's surrounding the Kerem. In other words, the Kerem is in the middle. The edges of the Kerem next to the fence, it's become the trees have been uprooted or whatever it was. So bein Kerem together. So if the Mochel Kerem bein Kerem together, if it doesn't have 12 cubits, you can't plant anything. If there's 12 cubits, then you have to move away 4 cubits from the trees, from the edge of the trees, from the tree trunks. You'll have to move away 4 amas, which is necessary for the work of the vineyard, consider part of the vineyard, and then the hashar, and you will be able to plant the rest. So, just very briefly, it's a similar idea over here, except that here we don't have vineyards on both sides. So we have the vineyard only for one side. So we have the vineyard on one side, but there's another issue, that the land next to the fence is not considered an entity, cannot be considered a field or an entity in its own. The reason being is because by the walls, that's where people walk backwards and forwards. The kids are, because of the walls, people don't plant next to the walls. So you can't say, oh, my field is starting from the wall. No, your field does not start from the wall. So the 4 cubits next to the wall will never be considered as a field. It's a place which people don't plant there, and because the whole, just leave us. You don't get plant right up to a wall, and you leave about 6 foot, which is Aladamas. And so therefore, that does not count as an entity, as a different field. So therefore, what we're left with, so we have 12 amas, so we're only left with, take away the 4, which is next to the wall, so we're left with 8 amas. So therefore, there's the same principle we learned before. 4 amas next to the vineyard, you can't plant there. Then the space with the space after that, the closer after that. So if that space is large enough to be called the Soda, which is how much 4 amas, then it's an entity in its own. If it's less, then it's not an entity in its own. It's not a Soda. So it becomes bottled to the vineyard, and therefore, in order to have enough space, that you should have 4 amas for the oxen, then 4 amas to become an entity in its own, and then the wasteland, which doesn't count, the wasteland, a minimum wasteland of 4 amas as well, which next to the wall. So altogether, you must have a minimum of 12. If you don't have the minimum of 12, then you don't have an ability to plant. Yeah. So the kids transport. So we understand that. In all this, the stricter thing is to make the distance bigger between the vineyard. You have to, to be machmir, if we don't know which what we're referring to a small amma or a big amma, of course, you have to be machmir. So therefore you're machmir, so therefore you have to make these measurements. You have to, in order to make it kosher, to be able to plant in the middle, you have to have it even further away. Take the big ammas. So therefore the big ammas is the ones with which you measure when you come to the vineyard. But that's fine. But then the Gemara comes up with the question about there is a problem that there's a thing is like this, that if they're next to each other, so the chalal grows in rows. You grow the vineyards. They grow. You put them in rows. Now, so the Gemara is going to explain. It's now learned the Mishnah kerem hanatua al pochas me'arba amos. If so, the vineyard is a sorry. The vineyard is the vineyard is of this. When is it called a vineyard? The vineyard is done with a certain seder, a certain distance. If you have a tree here, a tree there, it's not called a vineyard. A vineyard is within reasonable of how you plant vineyards. Then it has the din of a vineyard. If it does not have a din of a vineyard, then it's much more lenient. If you have a random tree, like I mentioned before, a random tree, you only have to move away 6 tvachim, not 4 amos. It's once it becomes established as a vineyard, that is when you need to remove yourself 4 amos from the vineyard. So now how close is the trees allowed to be next to each other in order for this vineyard to be a vineyard? Now, so the maximum, if the distance is more than 8 cubits, if the distance from one tree to another is more than 8 cubits, that's not considered a vineyard. Then they're individual trees. That's simple to understand. The trees are too far apart. It's not a vineyard. It's like an individual. Not only if it's too far, if it's too close to each other, it's also not considered a vineyard. Because according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says if it's too close to each other, it's also not considered a vineyard. Why? Because you don't plant a vineyard like this. That is not. Yeah, it's not a vineyard. You've made a mess over here with the trees. I don't know what's done here. It's not a vineyard because it's too close to each other. You can't properly work the vineyard, so it's too close. It's not a vineyard. You've bunched a few trees together. It's not together of a vineyard. If it's not together of a vineyard, so then you don't have to move away from them. You don't have to move away 4 amos from the trees. Just move away from a tree 6 tvachim, and you're okay. So let's do the inside. So if you have this vineyard and the trees are less than 4 amos distance from each other, so let's say we have 3 lines of a vineyard. Let's imagine we have 3 rows in a vineyard, and each one is 3 amos from another. The one row, 3 amos. So the 3 rows are so we have 3 rows, and each row is just 3 amos. So according to Rabbi Shimon, it's not a vineyard. So if it's not a vineyard, so all you have to do is you can as long as you remove yourself 6 tvachim from the trees, you can plant even between the trees. You can go between the trees and plant as long as it's 6 tvachim away from the tree. Rabbi Shimon in a kerem. Chacham said no, it's a kerem. It is a kerem. You look at the middle ones as if they're not there. So you look at the middle ones as if they're not there, and therefore, okay. So what we have 2 rows here we have 3 rows of trees. We have 3 rows of trees, and then the middle row is there's only 3 amos from the middle row to the side rows. So we say that let's ignore the middle row. So ignore the middle row, and from the 2 outside rows are 6 amos from each other. No, so that's fine. So that's a kerem. By the way, the reason of the Chachamim why you ignore the middle ones is because you say they are going to be uprooted. They're going to, even though it disturbs, you can't work the kerem properly like that. It's not a proper kerem. But they say, listen, the person is not going to leave it there. He's going to take it out. Because when he planted, he just plant a lot of trees. He wants to see how it works out. And later he'll thin it as necessary. And so therefore it doesn't disturb the kerem. So the kerem is a kerem because you're going to keep the ones which are the correct distance. And the ones which are too close, you just move away. So what's the question? So over here, if you make a big distance, according to Rabbi Shimon says, if it's less than arba amos, it's not a kerem. So what happens if it's going to be less than 4 big amos? And you'll say it's not a kerem, but maybe you should do small ones Because the Kalayim, you're saying maybe you should do small ones. If you do small ones, then it will be considered the Kera. So that means according to the opinion of Shimon, you have a problem if you're going to use the big amas to work out the spaces between the trees for the minimum spaces, not the maximum space, for the minimum space between the trees. So you have a problem. According to Shimon, you'll be going the puller. So the Kitzer, so the Gemara says Kirabonon. You know what? You have a good question for Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Nachman holds the Kirabonon. The Amri Havakerem. He says it is a Kerem. Ibai Sema, that's the one teretz is that Rabbi Nachman holds the Kirabonon. And again, the Ibai Sema, another teretz later Rabbi Shimon, the Rav Amos Kamar, and it's the majority. It's most of the Amos. He's not talking about all the Amos by Kerem. The majority of Amos by Kerem, because we always go to be stricter. So the majority of time by Kerem, it works out that we should use by Kerem. We should use the sixth Amos, the sixth Pachim Amos. I'll just try and finish off the page. The Rabbi says in the name of Nachman, Kol Am. He also says in the name of Nachman, but he says no, there's no question. The Amos are not from what's it called? Are not five stuff. Five Amos were only used in this Hamikdash, whatever. That's five. Whatever. Five. The Amos are 6 foot. That's a standard. There's no question. Anytime the Chacham speak about Amos, it means 6 foot. That's what Rabbi says in the isn't it? But there is a difference. Why? Because the Amos are made out. How do you get the Amos? 6 tvachim. Now the 6 tvachim, they can be either very tight or they can be slight loose. When you put 6 tvachim next to each other, you can either pack them, squeeze them tight to each other, and or you can. This, by the way, the size of a tefach is 4 fingers. 4 fingers. So the Rambam says it's 4 agudl. Each agudl, this finger, 4 times. This is a tefach. But each tefach is if you squeeze them tight, or if you a bit loose. And according to the Rashba, the difference between tight and loose tvachim is half a finger, not too much, but there's half a finger. That's all. Yeah, but there is this small difference if it's tight or not. And then again, it's a suffix. Therefore, when we speak about Amma, every Amma is 6 tvachim. So then we have again the suffix. Are we talking about the tight Amma, whether the tvachim are tight or not? And then again, we have to go to Chumrah to see whichever we never know. So that we always have to go to Chumrah. So therefore, the Rabbi Nachman Omar Kol Amos ba'al b'shisha. All the Amos, of course, is 6. There's no only in the Mikdash there's a Ma'aser with 5, but like this it's 6. Hello, halol sheichik is halol tzeitis. Those are tight, and those are not so tight, loose. Yeah. I'll just start question. Mesa, we're going to ask the question. We learned in Bryce, Kol Am Shomer Chachom Ba'am Bashisha Bashisha. All Amos Chachom say that the Am of 6. So we have Bryce says clearly. Except it's not exact. Why? Because sometimes it's a bit tighter. Sometimes it's loose. You can't say all the Amos are not exactly all the Amos from all the different dinim are going to be the same. For some dinim you're going to use the Amma which is made up loose tvachim. It's going to be slightly larger, and for some Ammas you'll use the Amma which is a bit smaller, which is like we said before, half a finger smaller. But that's because we measure it by tight, using tight, and so but all the Ammas are 6 foot. Therefore he says Mishlan will over so shloyim mechuvonis, but all the Ammas which Chachamim say. The places points out Chachamim, not in the Torah. The Torah is not about the Chachamim when they speak about Amma. That's Bashisha. The Mishlan of Gehechet Le'Evin. We understand that it says they're not all the Amos, not exactly the same. It depends on which halachas. So some are tight and some are loose. So it's a kasha. Rabbi said that sometimes you use an Amma for the chumrah, you use Amma of 5, but sometimes you use the chumrah and 6. But here it says kol Amma shomer is 6. So that was a kasha on Abaya. We will stop over here.
Thanks very much.